was with the foster mother, deep within a mountain valley, secluded from the outside world, lived a child whose mere existence broke your heart. He didn't live in a house, but in an abandoned dog coop behind the kitchen. He survived on rotting food scraps and endured endless brutal beatings. The village chief had tried to intervene a few times, but every attempt ended with him being cursed at and driven away. "He's my son. I'll treat him however I damn well please," the boy's stepmother, Dao Ying, had screamed, her spit flying in the scorching midday heat. The surrounding villagers could only bow their heads and sigh in helpless frustration. I lived far from the Chen family and rarely passed by their yard. Yet, whenever I carried water back from the river, I would secretly hide a warm steamed bun in my pocket and toss it over their fence before hurrying away. Everything changed on a quiet afternoon while I was walking through a narrow alley to buy supplies. Strange lines of glowing text suddenly materialized in midair right before my eyes, as if written by an invisible hand. "When this boy grows up, he is going to wipe out every single person in this village. They all deserve it anyway. This is just his villain origin story, ladies. The more he suffers now, the more satisfying his revenge will be later." I stood frozen in place as I read the gruesome descriptions of how every person in the village would die, accompanied by distant, ghostly screams echoing in my ears. A cold dread seized my heart. I didn't know if I was going crazy, but those words burned into my mind, keeping me awake for nights on end. Ultimately, to save the village and rescue that helpless child, I gathered all my savings and walked straight to the Chen family's front yard. I was going to buy him. Dao Ying, Chen Yong'en's new wife, eyed me from top to bottom. Her narrow triangular eyes gleamed with mockery and disdain. "Look at that, another foolish saint playing savior. Fine, you want to buy him? 50 yuan. Not a single penny less." After years of poor harvests, no household in the village was wealthy, let alone a single woman like me living on her own. 50 yuan was a fortune, but remembering those horrifying floating words, I didn't hesitate for a second. Deal. Perhaps because I agreed too quickly, the sneer on Dao Ying's face froze. Her small eyes darted back and forth as her mind raced. "Hold on, the brat can still do farm work when he grows up. 50 yuan isn't enough. 100 yuan. To prove her point, she grabbed a fake wooden stick nearby and struck the chained child in the corner of the yard. Heavy thuds echoed as wood met flesh. "Look here, the merchandise is still breathing. And he's a boy." The child curled his frail body inward, trying to dodge the blows, but the heavy iron chain around his neck jerked him back. He couldn't escape. He didn't cry or scream. His eyes were hauntingly hollow and dark, as if he had long grown accustomed to the pain. His name was Chen Yong'en, the son of Chen Yong'en and his late first wife. Just hearing his name told you his mother must have been educated. Her name was Wen Jiahui, a gentle city woman sent to the countryside years ago. People said Wen Jiahui was soft-spoken and kind, but the brutal hardship of rural poverty quickly withered her health. Desperate for a living, she married Chen Yong'en, a local drunkard. I always felt they were completely mismatched. A refined scholar and a crude, coarse man. A year ago, when Jiahui vanished, the villagers gossiped that she had run away, but no one knew her true whereabouts. Not long after, Chen Yong'en married Dao Ying, a sharp-tongued woman who calculated every penny. From the moment Dao Ying stepped into the house, she hated her stepson. Yet, because Chen Yong'en was Chen Jiangguang's only son, the father occasionally bragged about him to neighbors. Out of resentment, Dao Ying took every opportunity to torture the boy. Resenting his former wife for abandoning him, Chen Jiangguang eventually stopped intervening. Beatings, starvation, and verbal abuse became routine. When kind-hearted neighbors tried to stop them, Dao Ying would shriek, "What? Are you the reincarnation of the goddess of mercy? If you care so much, give me money and raise him yourselves." In impoverished times, people could barely feed their own families, let alone taking someone else's child. Looking at Chen Yong'en's emaciated frame, I couldn't stop myself from pulling a warm bun from my pocket and holding it out to him. The boy looked up at me for a split second, then lowered his head and devoured it hungrily. Beside us, Daoying felt no pity. Instead, she laughed maliciously. Great, that saves me from cooking his meal today. At that exact moment, invisible lines of text floated across my vision again, pulsing with anger, vicious monster. Just wait, you're the first one he executes. Oh, poor Yong'en. Someone please save him. I clenched my fists tightly. I didn't know where these floating words came from, but thinking about the dark fate foretold for our village, I knew I had to act. I didn't have much, but anything was better than leaving him in this living hell. My home stood isolated at the foot of the back mountain, far from the rest of the village. It was peaceful there, birds singing in the morning, streams trickling at dusk. It was ideal for hunting, which was how my father had made a living. Just a month ago, my father passed away, leaving me alone in our small wooden house. At 25, I was already considered an old maid by village standards. Truth be told, I wasn't even his biological daughter. 25 years ago, I was abandoned on a snowy mountain slope. If an old hunter hadn't passed by, I would have frozen to death. He brought me home and named me Lin Yan, saying that anything harvested from the mountain must be raised with a pure heart. To take care of my aging father, I had sworn never to marry unless a man agreed to marry into our household. But before he could see that day, his old illness recurred. I spent everything I had trying to save him, but he passed away anyway. After the funeral, I was left with a few dented pots and chipped wooden chopsticks. The 50 yuan I had offered earlier was money I had gathered by borrowing from everyone I knew. That night, sitting by the hearth, I remembered my father's dying words. I left a small safety net under the bed. If life ever gets too hard, use it. I pried up a loose brick beneath the bed frame. Underneath was a frayed, threadbare cloth pouch. Inside were a few crumpled paper notes and a small nugget of gold, totaling over 150 yuan. He had quietly saved it over decades of hunting. I held the gold nugget under the dim oil lamp. In these strict times, trading gold was illegal and dangerous. Just as I considered tossing it aside, the glowing text erupted once more in mid-air, frantic and urgent. Don't throw it away. That's gold. Keep it safe. Gold will be worth fortunes in the future, way more than paper currency. Startled, my hands trembled. I carefully tucked the gold into a wooden box. Looking at the remaining cash in my hands, I hesitated. I could take this money, leave the village, and start a fresh life elsewhere, avoiding the disaster mentioned by the text. Yet, whenever I closed my eyes, I saw that boy's hollow, dark eyes staring back at me like a dried-up well. If I turned my back now, that image would haunt me for the rest of my life. I saw my younger self in him, an abandoned child with nobody to care for her. I wiped my tears, walked into the yard, and knelt before my father's fresh mound of earth. Kowtowing 3 times against the cold ground, I whispered, "Father, if I can pull this off, please protect us from above." I waited a few days before returning to the Chen household. The dirt path leading into their yard was choked with dust and withered vegetables. Daoying's eyes lit up the moment she saw me carrying a thick pouch of money. Knowing her greedy nature, I deliberately put on a cold expression and turned around. Never mind. He's been beaten half to death anyway. Spending this much money on him isn't worth it. Her hurried footsteps echoed behind me. Wait, wait, don't leave. Everything is negotiable. She pulled her husband aside, whispering urgently while glancing at me. Greed finally won them over. When unchaining the iron link from his neck, Daoying deliberately yanked it hard. The cold clatter of iron against bone made my stomach turn. I snapped, "Daoying, what do you think you're doing? He is my son now," I warned, stepping closer. "I don't care how you treated him before, but if you lay another finger on him, I will make you pay." Though I was a woman, I was tall, broad-shouldered, and accustomed to heavy farm work and mountain hunting. Dao Ying shrank back in genuine fear. Her husband was a scrawny drunkard who couldn't win a real fight against me. Chen Yong'en was so malnourished, he looked like a withered branch. At 5 years old, his frame was no bigger than a toddler's. I wrapped him tightly in an old coat I had brought along and lifted him into my arms. He was terrifyingly light, as if a strong gust of wind might blow him away. Throughout the entire walk home, he didn't utter a sound, struggle, or even look at me. His soul seemed completely drained. I lowered my voice gently. "Little one, I bought you. From now on, you are my son. Nobody will ever hit you again, and you'll never have to go back there." He remained silent, his gaze cold and lonely. Back at my cabin, I heated a large pot of water to bathe him. He was covered in grime, his long hair matted into hard knots, crawling with lice. When I stripped off his rags, my breath caught in my throat. His tiny body was a horrific canvas of old and new injuries, deep purple bruises overlapping open, cracked wounds. Having hunted with my father, I was used to blood and wild beasts. But seeing this on a child chilled me to the core. The glowing text filled the air again like a sudden rainstorm. Monsters! How could anyone do this to their own flesh and blood? Oh, poor Yong'en. Then a single line stood out alright. I officially declared this woman has survived her bad ending. I let out a soft laugh at the strange commentary. I poured warm water into the basin. Seeing the rising steam, Chen Yong'en instinctively cowered, his small body trembling uncontrollably. "Does it hurt?" I asked softly. He didn't answer, his thin shoulders shaking. When I reached out to pat his head, he flinched violently, besplashing water all over my clothes. I changed the water several times, adding dried honeysuckle leaves to cleanse his wounds and mask the foul odor. Once the layer of dirt was washed away, I saw how pale his skin was from prolonged starvation. That night, I placed him on the bed and sat nearby to keep watch. As I drifted off to sleep, a heavy thud startled me awake. Chen Yong'en had fallen off the bed. He didn't cry or scream. He simply crawled silently into the darkest corner of the room, curling into a ball and clutching his knees, an ingrained habit from living in the dog coop. I sighed softly, spreading a thick blanket on the floor beside him. "You can sleep here if the bed feels too soft." He lay motionlessly in the pale moonlight streaming through the window. By the next morning, Chen Yong'en had developed a burning fever. His forehead was scalding, his lips cracked, and his body shivered in fits. The hot bath had likely triggered an infection in his untreated wounds. I hurried to the village doctor for herbal medicine. In rural villages, when a child fell sick, they simply had to endure it if they survived. Good. If not, there was always room on the back mountain. I brewed the bitter medicine and fed him spoon by spoon. He offered no resistance, swallowing obediently like a quiet, broken animal. I cooked a pot of white rice porridge mixed with salted meat bits left behind by my father. The savory aroma filled the cabin. Though his eyes remained vacant, he swallowed every bite I fed him without wasting a single drop. The floating texts crowded together excitedly, wipe his body down to lower the fever. Keep him warm. Don't give him cold water. I smiled gently at their frantic instructions. Within a few days, his fever broke. His breathing leveled out, and his face looked peaceful in sleep, free from terror. When he finally opened his eyes and looked at me, his gaze was still guarded, like still water hiding deep currents. He refused to leave the room, and I didn't force him. For the next few days, he explored the house like a timid animal released from a cage, touching a bowl, smearing charcoal on his hands, constantly glancing around to see if he would be beaten. When the field bell rang, I stood at the doorway and asked softly, "I'm heading to the fields. Do you want to come with me?" Silence answered me. I left some food and a woven rattan ball my father had crafted for me when I was 7. Down in the fields, news traveled fast. Everyone knew I had spent 100 yuan to buy the Chen family's boy. Some praised my kindness, while others sneered, "Why waste your life raising someone else's brat? Focus on finding a husband." A foul-mouthed man in the village wiped his sweat and gritted his teeth with a crude grin. "Hey, Lin Yan, give the kid the bag and marry me instead. We can live together and save you all this trouble." The field erupted into loud laughter. I raised my head and threw him a cold, sharp glare. Embarrassed and angry, he muttered, "I was doing you a favor, you ugly brute." I narrowed my eyes, my voice cutting through the noise like ice. "What did you just say?" "Say it louder so I can drag you to the village well and let you look at your own ugly face." Flustered, he turned and scurried away, shouting back, "Strong-headed woman, you deserve to die single." I snorted softly at his cowardice. When the evening bell rang, I carried my shoulder baskets home. The front door was slightly ajar, the interior dark save for the fading sunset light. Chen Yong'en was still curled up on his blanket in the corner, the rattan ball untouched, but his football was licked clean. Suddenly, a pungent odor hit my nose. He had relieved himself right there inside the room. I stood quietly, looking at his frail back. I couldn't bring myself to scold him. Locked in a dog coop for years, he had lost all concept of human hygiene. A child treated like a beast couldn't automatically know how to live like a human. Teaching him would be far harder than I thought. Without a word of complaint, I cleaned up the mess, placed an old wooden bucket in the corner, and patiently showed him how to use it. He stared at me with wide, empty eyes, unsure if he understood. That evening, he ate his dinner in silence, mechanically stuffing food into his mouth. Seeing his stomach bulging, I took the bowl away. "Don't eat too fast, or your stomach will hurt." He clutched his shirt hem tightly, staring at the floor. Days passed in this strange, quiet rhythm. I worked the fields and hunted in the mountains while he stayed home alone, never crying, never speaking, never smiling. Then one day, I noticed something small. 2 greasy handprints on the old woven rattan ball. I smiled softly to myself. He wasn't completely unfeeling after all. That evening on the mountain, I stumbled upon an injured, pregnant mother rabbit hiding in the brush. Taking pity on her, I brought the entire nest home, building a warm corner lined with dry straw and old cloth. The next morning, as I prepared to leave, a tiny figure dashed past me toward the rabbit nest. Chen Yong'en crouched on his bare feet, gently placing a tiny hand on the mother rabbit's back with extreme care. From that day on, I left rabbit fodder outside the fence, but the rabbits were always fed. I noticed tiny footprints in the dirt and bits of grass clinging to Yong'en's sleeves. A playful idea crossed my mind, and I decided to test him. On the first day, I deliberately left no fodder out. Yong'en looked at me with anxious, pleading eyes. On the second day, his lips parted, but no sound came out. By the third day, he couldn't sit still, pacing back and forth while staring at the door. On the fourth day, while I was lighting the stove, he walked up and tugged gently at my sleeve. "What is it?" I asked, looking down. He pointed toward the rabbit nest, his eyes full of worry. I pretended not to understand and kept tending to the fire. Anxious, he stomped his small feet repeatedly, straining his throat until small strained sounds broke from his mouth. He hadn't spoken in so long. "Do you want to cut some grass for them?" I suggested softly. He nodded frantically. I handed him a small sickle. "Go to the back garden and cut some fresh grass." He clutched the sickle tightly, standing frozen before me. I waited patiently in silence. Realizing I wasn't going to do it for him, he dragged the sickle behind him and trudged toward the garden. The floating text burst into cheerful comments. "Why isn't she helping our adorable little baby? The bunnies are so cute." Gradually, Chen Yong'en stopped hiding under his blanket and spent his days feeding the rabbits. But feeding them 8 times a day was too much. I took the grass from his hands and warned, "If you feed them too much, they'll die." He glared up at me in anger, a wild spark returning to his eyes. You have to learn, I said softly, stroking his hair. You have to learn how to be a human again. A text floated across. Once he learns, he's going to destroy the whole village, and you won't be spared either. Yong'en let out an angry grunt, but I felt relieved. His anger was far better than his former lifeless state. One afternoon, I went down to the river to fetch water without locking the front door. Before I even reached the gate on my return, a woman's furious screech echoed from inside the house. You little bastard, you dare bite me. You've only been here a few days, and you've already forgotten the taste of my cane. I charged inside with my shoulder pole and slammed it hard against Dao Ying's arm. She shrieked in pain, turning her furious glare upon me. Who the hell dares hit me? I pulled Chen Yong'en behind me and raised my chin cold. Your ancestor. Recognizing me, Dao Ying showed no shame for breaking into my home. She thrust her wrist into my face, revealing a deep bloody ring of teeth marks. Look at what your brat did. Pay for my medical treatment, or this won't end here. I laughed bitterly and shoved her arm away. Medical treatment? You broke into my house and hit my child. Get out before I break both your legs. Behind me, Chen Yong'en clutched my shirt hem, weeping uncontrollably as he pointed at the ground. The mother rabbit lay on her side, breathing weakly. Dao Ying had thrown her against the wall. It's just a damn rabbit. Dao Ying spat back. That brat has no mother to teach him manners anyway. Hearing those words, Chen Yong'en went wild. He bolted into the kitchen, grabbed a heavy meat cleaver, and rushed out, his eyes bloodshot with rage. He swung the cleaver straight toward Dao Ying. She screamed in horror, stumbling backward and fleeing out the gate like a frightened hen. I grabbed Yong'en's shoulders tightly. Enough, it's okay now. The heavy cleaver clattered to the ground. Yong'en collapsed into my arms, sobbing a single word. Rabbit. I knelt beside the mother rabbit. Her condition was critical. Remembering the animal medicine skills my father taught me, I boiled water and performed an emergency delivery. After an hour, 8 tiny bunnies were born, though 2 were stillborn. By nightfall, the mother rabbit's breathing stopped completely. The next morning, Chen Yong'en dug a tiny grave in the backyard with his bare hands. He buried the mother rabbit and knelt there for a long time, weeping silently. For the first time, he voluntarily drew his small arms around my neck and buried his face in my chest. I held him tightly, stroking his hair in comforting silence. The floating text gently scrolled by. It's okay. Losing something you love is a painful lesson, but he'll grow stronger. A few days later, Dao Ying returned, bringing a crowd of angry villagers to my front yard. She held up her bruised wrist, yelling, "Look at this! That child is a monster. He bit me and tried to kill me with a knife." The villagers gasped and murmured among themselves. "He's dangerous," one man shouted. "A child who turns on his parents is a menace to the whole village." I stepped in front of Yong'en, my voice icy. "What are you trying to do, Dao Ying? You have no manners, Lin Yan." Dao Ying sneered. "An uneducated orphan picked up from the snow has no right to speak to elders. Pay us 50 yuan for damages, or we won't let this go." The crowd chimed in, demanding money under the guise of village justice. A burly man stepped forward, rolling up his sleeves. "You arrogant girl, let me teach you a lesson." Without a word, I turned to the wall, unhooked my father's heavy hunting bow, knocked a steel-tipped arrow, and drew the string tight, aiming straight at the center of the crowd. Dead silence fell over the yard. Nobody dared move a muscle. The floating text went wild. "She is so badass. Look at her handling that bow." I want to kneel before her. In the middle of the standoff, a greedy villager tried to sneak toward my wall to steal a hanging leopard skin. Chen Yong'en picked up a heavy rock and hurled it straight at the thief's back. The hit landed with a dull thud. The crowd panicked, shouting, "See? He's a wolf cub. He's going to murder us all one day. What is going on here?" A booming voice shouted. The 60-year-old village chief pushed through the crowd, slamming his wooden walking stick against the ground. Are you all out of your minds? Harassing a single woman and a young child is illegal, he shouted, scolding the mob into silence. The floating text flooded the air. Are these villagers insane? What did the little kid ever do to them? The chief pointed his stick at Dao Ying. You malicious woman, trying to ruin them because you can't stand seeing them live well? If you cause trouble again, I'll post your confession at the market. Chen Yong'en stepped forward, muttering awkwardly, Chief, my wife was just worried Lin Yan couldn't raise the boy. Before he could finish, I stepped forward and delivered a resounding slap across his face. You think I only dare hit your wife? I barked. Wen Jiahui must have been blind to marry a coward like you. If either of you sets foot in my yard again, my arrows won't miss. As the chief began lecturing the crowd on legal consequences, Chen Yong'en raised a small, trembling hand and pointed straight at Chen Yong'en. Doing harm to people is illegal, right? The boy asked clearly. I want to report him. He harmed someone. A quiet gasp echoed through the yard. Chen Yong'en led the village chief and the crowd to the abandoned dog coop behind the Chen house. Buried beneath the wooden floor of the coop, they uncovered human bones, the remains of Wen Jiahui. She had never run away. She had been murdered by her husband. Outraged by the horrific truth, the educated city youth in the village demanded immediate action. Police arrived, arresting both Chen Yong'en and Dao Ying for murder and complicity. As the police led them away, Chen Yong'en held his mother's urn tightly, tears streaming silently down his face. Then he turned to me with bright, clear eyes and whispered, Mother, let me take you home. In the years that followed, the villagers kept their distance out of guilt and fear. When economic reforms swept the country years later, guided by subtle hints from the mysterious floating text, I took Yong'en and moved to the sunny south. We settled in a bustling coastal town. I worked tirelessly at multiple jobs to afford books and schooling for him. Knowledge, I believed, was the one thing nobody could ever steal from him. Chen Yong'en grew into a brilliant, confident young man with a talent for engineering. He entered a top university, launched his own technology firm, and established educational funds for underprivileged rural children. Years later, at a national awards ceremony, he stood under bright stage lights and looked down at me in the audience. Without my mother, I wouldn't be here today. He spoke into the microphone, his voice rich and full of pride. She taught me how to stand tall, how to endure pain, and how to remain kind in a harsh world. I was once an abandoned child, but I became the luckiest person on earth because I had her. Tears filled my eyes as the auditorium erupted in applause. The nightmares of the past had long faded, replaced by the gentle southern breeze and the warmth of a family that had fought through the darkest night to reach the dawn.